Good afternoon, students, soldiers at Fort Irwin. My name is Kelly Parker, and I am your instructor this fall for English 1A. I would like to extend an apology, as it were, for not being in the classroom with you this week. I know that you all value in-class learning, as do I. Last weekend I had a heat exhaustion event. I'm sure you know what those are from your field training. And I've had a very slow week of recovery. I expect to be fully recovered in a couple days and able to be with you next week. That being said, I want to give you an introduction of myself, so you see I'm here, and also to kind of give you an overview of basically from my notes. I have notes from all of the weeks of class, by the way, but for now let's just focus on week one and what the intended goal of our learning really is. If you read the syllabus, note that it is what's called boilerplate, right? It's like any government form. I'm sure you know what a government form is, right? It's going to have a lot of stuff in there that is necessary because the administration needs to see it there. However, a lot of that extra information may not be, may kind of obscure, what is really important. So I will try to give you announcements now and then. Like, for example, on Monday, 16th, there's an announcement that will show you there are some things technically missing from the syllabus. For example, how the grades will break down. And I think it's better to present that to you next week and perhaps even negotiate some of that with you so that you know what your expectations are and are confident that you can take on those expectations. That being said, there are really two types of writing that we are hoping to get a really good foundation on, okay? And one of them is argument, right? So what is an argument, right? The other one is exposition. What is an exposition, right? So what we're going to be doing is starting with the elements of exposition, which is really to expose things, to explain things, not necessarily to persuade others to take our point of view, but just to say, hey, these are the facts, right? To explain. Perhaps you want to give someone directions, how to go from, your barracks to, say, Barstow, right? How are you going to do it? That would be an explanation, right? By contrast, say you wanted someone in your barracks to get to Barstow and leave you alone for a while, right? Then you might have an argument, right? Where you're trying to convince or persuade someone to go somewhere, right? And so in persuasion, facts don't always matter, okay? And we will cover the details of that. We will cover this and explore this in class, but it's something to think about. We first need to be able to explain things, right, before we can persuade others. And before we can persuade others, we need to be able to explain. Okay, let me give you an idea. Let's think of it, our learning as we're on a pyramid, right? And the base of our pyramid is knowledge. Okay? All of the readings you've done all your life, all of the training, all of this input, that's your knowledge, right? But is knowledge by itself useful, right? when knowledge becomes useful, we begin applying it, right? We have application of that knowledge. And this application is what we are going to have two different essays about, right? We're going to apply our knowledge to two different essays. But we might have knowledge from two different areas that we have to somehow synthesize together, right? Okay. So we call that synthesis. I'm just leaving it up long enough so you can jot it down in your notepad, right? And of course I will make this video available for you so you can just watch it too. But we're moving our way up to basically our brains are working a little harder at each level. And we do this all the time on all fields of learning, right? So above synthesis, we then get to where we are able to evaluate other people's opinions, evaluate whether facts are true or false, right? We are testing. We are becoming critical, right? We are evaluating. So evaluation is at a higher level of thinking, right? So we're moving on up to the top. What do you think is the top? Creation. Putting it all together, right? Creation. So, this is our pyramid. What this is called, you can look it up online. It's called Bloom's taxonomy. If you're curious and want to kind of know a bit about this, it's a very important notion in adult learning theory, right? We learn different now. We're older. We're not children anymore, right? So my teaching philosophy is very much guided by this desire to help students move from knowledge to application to synthesis, evaluation, and creation. And what are we going to create? Essays, right? We're going to create essays. Now, hopefully, this is starting to make it come together for you. There's a purpose to writing these essays. But let's think about exposing, explaining things versus arguing, persuading, convincing, right? We're kind of moving up in levels, right? When we are in exposition, we're very much in knowledge, application, and sometimes synthesis, right? But when we are trying to persuade, to kind of say where one thing is better than another thing, right? We're trying to gradate. We are getting into evaluation, right? And we all do this. So the first half of our semester is going to focus on the bottom part, okay? Doesn't mean you're not going to be doing this other stuff. You're going to be thinking all the time, I hope. But the goal of an exposition essay is really kind of on the lower half of Bloom's taxonomy. Argument, however, is getting right up to the top. Evaluation, and then even the creation. With how do you convince people, people with different values, right? People who with different facts or think their facts are different than yours, right? We get a lot of that in the world these days, right? So how can you creatively approach that? So we're going to save that tougher stuff for the second half after our midterm, right? And basically, the goal is first 4 weeks we'll focus on exposition, and then we'll flow into argument, all right? Those are our two main projects, and those will be what your passing grade will be determined by, okay? Now, there are other smaller things that you will be required to do, right? So every week is a module that in this case it's Module 1. Think of it as Week 1, which is going to just show you what's here for this week, what's on deck, and then focus on that. But you will discover that when I open up Module 2, there's a connection, right? And so there will be a revealing every week, a little more, and it's going to connect, and I hope that you can be comfortable with this masking of the future so you can focus on the now, right? Focus on now, one step at a time. You all have experience with the English language, right? But you have a variety of experiences. For some of you, English is your mother tongue. For some of you, other language might be your mother tongue. If English is your mother tongue and you haven't lived overseas, then you are most likely monolingual, speaking one language, and that's kind of tough. It's kind of tough when speaking with other English language learners who know some English and maybe some other languages, right? So they're able to be bilingual or multilingual and switch around. The reason I bring this up is to point out to you the obvious. You have people in your class. Everyone in your class has a different English language learning background. And because of that, you have the potential to help inform each other, of what you've learned works and doesn't work, right? So we have to share some knowledge with each other. Another thing the other thing is that I'm going to transmit you knowledge. I'm going to try to get it to you. I'm going to give you materials, things to read, things to do. But learning is really, what should I say? It's two things happening at the same time. Let me get another sheet of paper. Right? This is another part of my educational philosophy. It's the idea that learning, let's say, our brains, okay? Think of it as our individual brain versus our collective brain, right? We can think by ourselves, but we also can collaborate with others, and we're still thinking. Both modes of thinking are essential for development of new skills, new knowledge. And if you can overcome your shyness and asking your colleagues for help, right, you will accelerate. You will certainly accelerate in your lifelong learning. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. And you'll find that in class I will often try to guide you to do some things together as well as some things solo. Okay, and that's just my teaching style, and you'll see that. So that, if you're curious, is from a teaching philosophy called constructivism, pioneered by a Lev Vygotsky, former Russian educator. So constructivism, as well as Bloom's taxonomy, is part of my teaching philosophy. Okay? Now, one of the things that I'm trying to replicate in this video lecture to you is a situation where you're mostly listening and maybe occasionally have some, something written on a board or something textual to remind you, but you need to be able to start listening and taking notes. Okay? Taking notes. So get yourself some notebooks, right? Such as this, I got notebooks I happen to be a law student, so this is for my contracts class, right? So get yourself some notebooks. If you have problems getting notebooks, please talk to the administration there at the fort. We're happy to give you notebooks. We have this stuff. You just have to ask, okay? Try taking notes. because now and then we're going to need to stop and just share our thoughts with other classmates or the whole class, and those notes will help us recall those key points. Okay? And of course, while you're listening to others, take notes. Not just your teacher. In other words, we can learn a lot from those teachers, but we can also learn a lot from our peers, right? So keep that in mind. Let me get a sip of water here. A typical class day will probably begin with a group activity as you enter, so you can kind of get acclimated to the classroom and warm up. If you have written homework that is due on that particular day, you're not required to hand it to me when you walk into the classroom. 2 reasons for that. One, we're going to use that writing in our class, and you may later on find that you want to change it or revise it, right? Or add something to it, right? So I would be collecting homework typically at the end of classes, right? Sometimes maybe at the beginning of the second class hour. We'll see. But in general, I want you to hold on to your writing and have it in front of yourself. So either write by hand or use a computer printer. I'm okay with either format of writing, okay? Whichever works for you. Although, if you're uncomfortable with either, that's something maybe let me know, right? Because nowadays, many young people like you, right, are kind of losing that touch of writing by hand. But there's a lot that goes on in our mind, in our cognition when we write by hand. It helps us solidify key points in our mind. It's kind of a meditation, right? Something to think about. The inverse is you still need to kind of get savvy on the word processing software, and that's not easy for everybody. And I'm going to help you with that in class, right? Some of you are much better at it than others, and that's where that constructivism helps, where you can help your peers share knowledge. You can learn from each other. Okay. So that's the overview part of today's lecture. Now I'd like to give you the main thing I want you to think about this week, right? And that is, what is good writing, right? What is good writing, right? Good. Good is actually an argument, isn't it? Good versus bad, right? So even if we can explain or expose what good writing is, we are actually arguing just a little bit, right? Anyway, I have one of my favorite professors from the past in rhetoric has written a good chapter on what is good writing, but it is not in your textbook, right? So I'm just going to flip through it and see if there are any key points that are worth sharing or making a comment on. One, yeah, she talks about the problem of models, right? And this is tough because the 5-paragraph essay is a model. And here I've asked you to write a 5-paragraph essay. The reason that I've asked you is because the course description specifically says we are going to move beyond the 5-paragraph essay. I need to know, how are you with the 5-paragraph essay, right? Simple as that. It's what we teachers call an informal assessment. We kind of need to see where most of you are at. And that particular writing prompt will help you think about what you know about English composition. What you really want to know. Maybe you don't care about exposition and argument, but let me know. What do you really want to know about English composition? And maybe brainstorm. Besides the learning environment here, or maybe at the learning environment here, maybe both. how can I learn more about what I want to know about English composition, right? You'll see those 3 paragraphs sandwiched by an introduction and a conclusion. That's 5 paragraphs, right? 5-paragraph essay. That is a model. These models don't really fly in the real world for real persuasion, because quite often we can make our point with just maybe one supporting idea, right? Or sometimes we have a complicated thing to explain where we need more than 3. So the 5-paragraph essay becomes useless in the long run. So that's what we call a model. There's no cookie-cutter way to be a good writer, right? Another thing is the standards for readability, right? I used to tell students, another place, I taught overseas in China for many, many years, and my slogan there was, write like a reader, read like a writer. Write like a reader, read like a writer. Why would I say that? Is because we have to be aware of the readability of what we type, what we write, right? So we have to think about others and how they're going to perceive our words, correct? So that's something to think about. When you write, consider who your possible readers are. And here's a mistake that many young students make, and it's not their fault. It has to do with the pressure of trying to earn a GPA and to pass. But when trying to learn a skill for writing that you can use with other people outside of class, you can use in your workplace, you can use at school, you can use anywhere, you have readers who are not your professor. But many students are worried about the grade, so they try to write in a way that they think that's what professors like to read, right? And that could just be frustrating, because you're writing for someone different than the general people you'd be writing for, right? So you need to think about all of your possible readers. And then another point to think about is significance. How significant is your writing? Is your writing just to pass this class, just to get an A, right? Well, that is a personal significance, right? But I hope that you will see that it's even more significant that you can leave class 7 weeks from now confident that you can explain and persuade, right? That you've got something you can use, something in your tool belt, right? So that's, to me, is where you really pass. Of course, if you do all the work, you're going to pass and pass with great grades. But I'm just letting you know that, so that you know that I am not, despite what one of my social media handles is, I'm not truly a GPA killer, right? I try to teach you how not to kill your GPA. And one way is to consider who else you're writing for, and also how important is that writing, right? Some writing tasks you need to get done in a day, right? Some writing tasks you need to get done in an hour. So you need to also think about, okay, this is important, right? My superior officer needs a report, right? I got to give her something, right? So we often now get hung up in the writing process itself. How can we quickly brainstorm and compose and just get to the point and satisfy our reader, give them the information, and move on, right? So, significance. We have something called unity within the text. We want it to feel like from start to finish, that is one text, right? It's not cut and paste from a bunch of places. It's all one main idea with supporting ideas. It's unified. So unity is something we're going to explore, and that's actually one thing I'm hoping to discover with your initial 5-paragraph essays, is kind of where you're at on unified writing. There's also acceptability. And acceptability keeps changing over the years, and it's about determining in who is reading, right? What group of people are reading, right? You might want to talk differently to different people, right? So you got to think about the type of person you're talking to and whether it's acceptable to use that particular language, those particular word choices, and so forth. So what is acceptable usage, right? So those are some of the ideas of what is good writing, and I'm going to ask you to explore this in your in the other part of this module, right? So I believe we are almost to a half an hour of lecture, which is about where I like to cap it. I generally don't like speaking for more than 20 to 30 minutes in a class hour, because there's all this extra time where you guys can be doing stuff together and working on stuff together. So hopefully this first lecture gives you an idea of the attention span you're going to need in my lectures. Right? Sit still for a half an hour and take notes, okay? That being said, I can't think of anything to add for this week. Right? On Sunday midnight, Module 2 will be revealed, and then I'm really optimistic that we'll be able to be in class on next Monday, right? Unless you happen to be in the box or somewhere else. And in that case, we'll be fine, because this is a hybrid course and we'll somehow communicate. So on Monday, we'll probably record the lecture too. I may need some help with that. I'm not sure from you guys, maybe the admin, but I think we'll get that taken care of. That way, any classroom lectures can be, I can upload them to Canvas so you can review them later, right? But during that class session, you're going to need to take notes and be able to talk about it with each other. I certainly have a lot of questions yet, but I hope that this has answered a lot, helped you feel a lot less confused, and really looking forward to seeing you next week. Take care, guys.